And we got Monday Night Football. We got the Minnesota Vikings against the Bears. Now, why is this even interesting? I'll tell you why it's interesting. The Chicago Bears, for all the criticism that they've gotten, John, and obviously they've got a lot of coaching things going on there. They got certain players going on, a lot of different things going on. They are still incredibly, they are willing to go out there and play the game like it's supposed to be played. And I'll tell you, their record doesn't look great, but they are playing some games that are very competitive. And not that that's getting you anywhere, but I think it just says a lot about the Chicago Bears. And the Minnesota Vikings now have an opportunity in front of them because of the Lions losing yesterday to the Bills. Now all of a sudden the Vikings are sitting there. And by the way, the Minnesota Vikings are the Rodney Dangerfield of football. And I say that because they get no respect. John, this is an 11-2 team that has dominated the entire year. They lost the two games that they lost. They lost them 2 in a row, and then they bounced right back. But Sam Darnold has been, and I'm the first to say, I was wrong on him. I thought this guy was a hack. I thought he was a guy that was overrated. He was like the 3rd or 4th pick in the entire draft. He'd done nothing in his career anywhere, and he's been a lot of places. But he came to the right place. And why do I say that? Well, he's got an all-pro tight end in Hawkinson. He's got basically the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, for sure. He's got Addison, who was the Biletnikoff Award winner when he was in college. And then you've got Naylor, who went in the draft in front of JJ. So I would say he's sitting there with a great group of guys, and maybe, just maybe, he's pretty good player himself. In the last 6 games, John, that he's played, they've won the last six in a row, 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Not so bad. And he just keeps lighting it up more and more and more each and every week. Now, the other guy that I'm impressed with, though, is your guy, Caleb Williams. I mean, it's interesting to watch a guy like this who's getting no credit now. Everybody's saying, well, he's kind of a bust and everything. Caleb Williams is not a bust. How about this, John? The last 10 games, he's got 14 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's only got 5 interceptions on the year, and that happened in the first 3 weeks in 2 of the games where he had 2 interceptions in each. He had 4 interceptions there. This kid is actually playing really, really well, and it's why when the Vikings played them just a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago in Chicago, the Vikings won in overtime. So this is a game that's kind of a game where Chicago's like, hey, look, we want to bring a little something, show a little something, and I think Caleb Williams, he went up against the Vikings defense and didn't even flinch. So tonight's game, I think, is going to be worth watching. And hopefully it's a nice close game. I think it will be, but you never know. Things can happen, but this should be a really fun game.
It should be. And, like you said, they had Washington beat, Pete, and then, their defensive back started, either, as he says, celebrating with the fans, or it didn't look like that to me. It looked more like he was basically flipping off the Washington fans and not keeping his head in the game, and then they got beat for a touchdown on a Hail Mary. There have been a couple games like that, and a couple games where, the kicker, Santos, I think it is, Pete, he's 36 for 36 inside the 40 or something like that. It's amazing. And Eberflus didn't even put him in position to kick it at the, against in the Thanksgiving game. So, yeah, I think you're right. It's a lot more coaching than it is players when you come down to that. And you put a couple of those losses, couple of those L's up as W's, and they're in the thick of it. They're not going to win the division, but they're in the thick of it. Yeah. That's coaching. And I hope that the Bears finally get a decent coach. I was kind of hoping, Pete, they might have got Belichick, but then he decided to go out where there are college cheerleaders instead of pro cheerleaders. And
I'll say this about Belichick, John. The one thing that I give him credit for is a lot of people are standing back behind, and we talked about this yesterday on our radio show here in Minnesota. And I was saying, basically college football has turned into pro football. Let's be honest. I mean, you've got free agency. They just call it the portal. You've got NIL. That's salaries. And these salaries are going like this, up, 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 and away, because I'll tell you what, a guy like Bill Belichick goes to North Carolina. I wonder what their NIL has jumped. I'll bet you it will double, John. They will probably be very close to $20 million or more. And all of it is because Bill Belichick is coming. He's a guy who understands young players because of all the drafts that he's had to do. But now young players are actually in college, obviously, but they are playing like they're pros. They got their free agency. They get their pay. They don't have to worry as much about this, that, and the other. And I think he's got a handle on that. And he's bringing in basically the staff at New England that he had, the general manager and everybody else. He's bringing down there to North Carolina. You know what the North Carolina GM is going to get paid? $1.5 million. And he's getting paid $10 million per year. So they have opened up the piggy banks down there at North Carolina for Belichick.
Yeah, well, you quoted his record with and without Brady last week, Pete.
Yep.
But still, he's not going to have Brady, but he is going to have many of the pieces of what could be building a great football team again.
And one of them is a sport that I've been critical of for a really long time. I think you and I have always agreed, but I've been so angry about it because I sit here in Minnesota and I watch a group of guys for the Timberwolves who all play basketball. They don't take any load management. Anyway, that being said, I wanted to point out that the NBA ratings are now 28% lower this year than they have been. Here's an even better stat, John. Since 2012, the ratings are down 48% in the NBA. You don't see those numbers in NCAA football, NCAA basketball, the NFL, none of that. But Disney still did give them a huge payday that I got to give kudos to Adam Silver. Past that, I got no kudos to give that guy at all, John. He has allowed this to happen where they do have load management. Hell, the guy even came out with certain rules about load management. I mean, that's how crazy this is. So I see what's happening here. They got a great new contract with ESPN. That part's fantastic, but nobody's watching. And if I'm ESPN, I'm sitting there looking at the guys who put this deal out there and said, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, because this is outrageous how bad it is. And John, they're trying everything. They've got this tournament within the NBA that these guys play, and nobody cares. They paint these floors that look ridiculous. It's not the hardwoods of yesteryear. And I'm not some huge throwback, but you know what? A lot of these, when you watch the games, it's distracting as hell because it just looks awful on TV to watch what the hardwood looks like now, all painted up and everything. But what do you think? Am I way too harsh on Adam Silver? Because I feel like he deserves so much criticism. I know certain things are going well, but at some point, this whole thing is going to stop and be done.
Well, that's the worry, Pete, because like you said, load management, that just means players are sitting down. Some players don't want to play 2 games even back to back.
Right.
So you got that. Second part is the shooting style. A lot of people really loved Michael Jordan and the Phi Slamma Jamma and all that stuff. Now you're getting 3-point shooters, from halfway down the court. Now that takes a lot of skill. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Steph Curry and these guys that can drop threes, just rain them in. That's interesting. But a lot of people really were in love with the slams, and they're not getting as many because of the threes, obviously, because you get more points for a 3-point shooter. Also, the league's been very left. Adam Silver's left. I think the league is left. And I think a lot of fans are just like they turned away from the left in the election, not happy about this with the NBA, Pete. And lastly, I'd say, even though they overpaid like crazy, because it's not just ESPN, but, the people that carry the game, and ESPN carries the bulk of them, paid $76 billion. And some people might say, wow, that's just crazy. And it is. But consider this. When you're in the film division of Disney or any of these others, Universal, whatever, when you're putting out a Fast and Furious, or you're even putting out an animated film that's doing really well, like Moana 2, Pete, It's killing. It's still doing really well. Even though the numbers were down on the second week of it, they did very well with that movie. You know how much it costs to get one of those movies out there between making the movie, paying the stars, and getting only whatever 40 or 50% of the gate because the theater gets the rest? Cost you about $500 million to get these movies out there. So you can see that if you paid $76 billion for the NBA for however many seasons of it, you compare that to the amount you have to put out for a movie that might be a total dog, because there are several, we can cover that tomorrow. There are several big dogs out there that are losing a couple $100 billion, not billion, but a couple $100 million. You get the idea that sports is still where you want your money, but that doesn't mean that they didn't overpay, because they did.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. They did. And I'll tell you what, at some point, this is going to run out and it's not going to be pretty.